Good morning, this is the newsroom. It's Friday, August 22nd, 2025, and it's D-Day, the day when members of the disciplined forces vote in Guyana's 2025 elections. Members of the disciplined forces voting today are the Army, the Police, and the Prison Service, and we're live in Georgetown covering the vote as it begins. The official opening of polls is 6 a.m. and our teams are spread out at main locations to cover the vote. Today, 6,909 police officers are registered to vote and 3,100 soldiers are also registered to vote, along with 466 prison officers. We can now join Vishani Raghaber, who is at the police officers' mess in Georgetown, where the top are voting.
Good morning and thank you for joining our newsroom live broadcast for today, Friday, August 22nd, 2025. We're bringing you live coverage of the Discipline Services voting today. Now, where I'm at the police headquarters at Eve Leary here in Georgetown, the officers' annex. And behind me, you can see officers' ranks all ready to vote at the opening of polls at 6 a.m. Now, today there are 10,481 ranks across the discipline services expected to vote. So those are ranks from the Guyana Police Service, the Guyana Defense Force, and the Guyana Prison Service. For the police force in particular, and I'm following the police force's voting process today. For the police force in particular, 6,909 ranks are expected to vote. Here at Eve Leary, the Commissioner of Police Clifton Hicken, along with other members of his executive leadership team and other ranks, are expected to vote. Again, as you can see them right behind me, they're here in line waiting for the opening of the start of voting at 6 a.m. My colleagues will be joining you from other locations across Georgetown. My colleague Kurth Campbell will be reporting from Base Camp in Ghana, where ranks from the Ghana Defense Force will be voting. And my colleague Isabella Patwa will be reporting from the Georgetown prison. Now, all of the officers are standing at attention as they raise the flag for the Ghana Police Force and, of course, Ghana's national flag, the golden arrowhead. Voting will soon begin here at Eve Leary. This is police headquarters at Eve Leary, Georgetown. So we're just waiting for the flags to go up, and we continue to bring you live coverage of what's unfolding here today.
We're continuing our coverage of D-Day, the day when members of the disciplined forces vote in Guyana's 2025 elections. As a reminder, today, members of the Army, the Police Force, and the Prison Service are voting ahead of elections on September 1st. They're voting today, just in case you're wondering, because they will be working on polling day, so it's important that they get the opportunity to cast their ballots in these elections. Now, before polls open, there are a number of things that have to be in place to ensure that this voting runs smoothly, that it's transparent, and that it is done according to law. The voting should open at 6. That's just about now, when the presiding officer of the polling station will announce the opening of the polls. But there are a number of things that he has to do, like I said, to ensure that the ballot today is done lawfully. So I just wanted to run through quickly with you some of the things that he has to do to ensure that that happens. So before these polls began, so maybe from 4 or 5 o'clock, those who are presiding over these elections would have been in the polling place to ensure that they're set up so that they can announce the start of polls at 6 a.m. Now, one of the most important things is the ballot box, which the presiding officer must ensure is intact for the voting. So there are a number of seals on these boxes, different colors to ensure the integrity of the ballot box. So on arrival at the polling station, there will be green plastic seals affixed on the cover of the ballot box, which are removed before the opening of the poll to facilitate access to the contents of the box. So this is like a big square container that they will have with all the information. And then there's a wire seal on the part of the ballot box where the actual ballot paper will go in after someone would have cast their ballot. There's also a yellow plastic seal which must be used to secure the cover of the ballot box in place before the commencement of the conduct of the poll. And then there's also a red plastic seal which must be affixed to the cover of the ballot box to secure the contents placed after the conclusion of the count and the subsequent packing of the box. And then there's also a red wire seal which is affixed to seal the aperture after the completion of activities at the close of polls. So a lot of seals there, a lot of different colors, all to ensure the integrity of the ballot box. This is the newsroom, and we're covering the voting of the discipline forces today, Friday, August 22nd. We can now turn to Isanella Pater for our continuing coverage. Isanella is covering the vote of the Guyana Prison Service.
Good morning. I am Isanella Patwa coming to you live from the Guyana Prison Services Guyana Prison Services headquarters here at Camp Street in Georgetown, where the Director of Prison Services, Nicholas Elliott, just arrived at this ballot place to cast his ballot in the September 1 general and regional elections. He, along with his other officers, will cast his ballot here. A total of 466 prison officers are registered to cast their ballot in these elections. The discipline services, which includes the Guyana Defense Force, the Guyana Prison Service, and the Guyana Police Force, are casting their ballots today across several polling stations across the country. Voting is happening today because the disciplined services will be on duty on the official E-Day that is on September 1, 2025. Ballot stations across the country opened at 6 a.m. and will close at 6 p.m. It is now 6:04, so the ballot place here is officially open. The officers, there are quite a few here, just about a dozen here, along with the Director of Prisons who just arrived, but voting has not yet commenced. Voting is also taking place at several prison services locations across the country, including Temeri, Lusignan, New Amsterdam, and Mazaruni. Right now, I can see one officer heading to the ballot station to possibly cast their vote. Once they arrive at the ballot place, they will present their national ID card, but persons can also vote using their driver's license and passport. The ballots cast today are not actually counted now. They're going to be intermixed at certain polling stations on the official E-Day, which is on September 1st, 2025. A total of 10,481 disciplined service members are registered to vote today. However, if for one reason or another they cannot vote today, they can do so on September 1 at the place that they registered. Coming behind me now is the Director of Prisons, Nicholas Elliott, who is going up now to cast his ballot. These elections are being closely monitored by international and local observers, including the Carter Center, the European Union, and the Commonwealth, and several local groups. There is Nicolon Elliott, there, the Director of Prison Services, checking the list of electors at the ballot place here at the Prison Service headquarters at Camp Street in Georgetown. Again, for those tuned in, voting is happening today for the discipline services, which include the Ghana Police Force, the Ghana Defense Force, and the Ghana Prison Service. A total of 10,481 ballots have been prepared for the disciplined forces. We are at the Prison Service headquarters in Georgetown on Camp Street, where the Director of Prisons, Nicolon Elliott, is the first to cast, or the first in line to cast his ballot at this ballot place. Four 466 prison officers registered across the country will be casting their ballots today.
Voting first in base camp in Ghana. There are approximately 24 voting places around the country where our ranks are deployed and are voting. My experience just now was a very organized and smooth one, and I want to thank all those who were responsible for ensuring that this was done successfully, at least when I wasn't there. I do not anticipate any issue because all soldiers are expressing and exercising their democratic right to participate in this beautiful and important process. As you know, traditionally, the joint services would vote before the general public would vote, and that is scheduled for the 1st of September. Throughout the day, soldiers will decide without coercion, vote as their right is so deemed to each one of them. And I expect no issue throughout the day. I believe we will have an update for you as the day progresses. Thank you so much.
If you could have, how many voting places are in Thailand?
We have 3, I believe. 3, yes. And you could have that also. The press is welcome to.
Your people at the border locations, how well are they outfitted, or how well is GCOM prepared to have them vote effectively and efficiently?
Yes. Those places are expected to start at this time also. We have all system in place. GCOM and their staff would have done the necessary work. And transportation and the necessary material and equipment would have been pre-positioned. Less for the ballots, which were escorted by the Ghana Police Force, along with members from the GCOM.
Help me to understand what plans you have in place for officers who may not be able to vote today.
Yes, so we have a number of officers who are overseas, courses, etc., and they will be allowed to vote on the 1st of September.
And that's through the consulate, or?
Some are returning to Guyana, Some are out. And those who can be afforded to vote overseas will be allowed to, within the regulations of GCOM.
Are you missing the servicemen who some of them would have been voting alongside you this morning? Do you think it is indeed an honor to them that so much time has elapsed, we don't know what happened to them there? They weren't given the opportunity to vote today?
Servicemen who,
Died in a helicopter crash.
well, certainly a death always impacts in many ways. And what we have today is those who will remember them and vote in their service, in the name of their service, and what they would have done for Guyana. The Guyana Defense Force is it's just a subset of the population. We come from you, and we are happy within this democratic process. Everyone is given the opportunity to exercise that in their own individual assessment and how they vote. And I'm happy that we are going to be doing just that, like we've been doing over the years.
But have you made it clear to your officers prior to today's voting that they are allowed to vote for any party of their choice? Or has the Army been pushing one party's agenda?
There's no particular agenda. Every day, every officer on rank gets up, put on their boots and clothes, and ready to serve the people of Guyana. Every soldier has a right to exercise their vote as they see fit. There's no coercion, there's no influence, and all the soldiers are doing just that, and across the force, and across the country.
Thank you, sir.
Can we see this by your finger?
Thank you so much. Have a good day.
And it's my right to vote, and I've done just that. The process in terms of GCOM, I think based on what I would have observed just now, they're on time, and everything is going smooth.
Are you going to be in contact with other locations to see how the day is progressing and officers turning up to vote?
Sure, Gordon. In fact, I'm going to spend the entire day visiting stations and all the areas where they'll be voting to ensure that everything is going smooth.
And about those outlying stations in the interior and so?
Exactly. Well, we have the commanders dealing with that, and we have officers from Georgetown going to the other regions to ensure that we give a perfect feedback of what's going on.
Commissioner Hicken, as we have you here, what's the level of preparation for polling day itself on September 1 for the wider public?
Well, thank you for asking the question. You know, before election, we've been working with the joint services in terms of our ISS, that's the training. In addition to that, we've had our units prepared. We have the training that is ongoing now. And so we are adequately prepared. Remember, nomination day we were quiet. We expect that this day is going to be quiet. And similarly, for the general regional election, we expect it to be quiet. The police are going to be prepared. We have increase in terms of our number of policemen voting this year. And so we're being across the regions, and we're going to be monitoring everything. We don't expect anything. We have Guyanese that are good people, and so we don't expect anything to happen.
Commissioner, going back to a few months ago, less than probably 3 or 4 months ago, there are concerns that in light of the police's apparent slow response in preventing looting and other forms of criminal activity after the Adriana autopsy on that day and evening, that the police did not do as much as they ought to have done. Coming out of that, what are some of the lessons you've learned in order to avoid a repeat of that during the election period?
Well, first of all, the decisions would be made based on what is going on. And when we heard that it was wronging, we took the appropriate action, and now must be prevailed.
Are you facilitating a visit from President Ali today?
Sure.
You are?
Sure.
And all the presidential candidates?
Sure. All the presidential candidates.
They would be visiting this location?
Yes, please.
Would you be here to greet them?
I'm not sure because remember I'm roving around to see which are the area of voting and ensure everything quiet.
Okay. I mean, poll just opened, but have you heard any other updates from polling stations?
Like I just walked out, I'm now
okay.
talking to you, Nazima. And when we finish it, then I'm going to go and start getting into the other region.
Commissioner, can you tell us what systems in place to ensure that every rank gets the opportunity to vote, irrespective of whether they're
We've been staggering out the duties based on what is needed and what is not needed. For the police who you're seeing here, they're going to vote early, they're going to go back. They got another set of police like they were going to come, finish early, go back until everybody concludes.
Would you be meeting with the press during this period, this election period?
At every location we go to visit, once the press is here, we'll talk.
I'm talking about press conferences and updating
We're going to
the
deal with
public.
that when the time is right. Let's finish off today, and then we're going to talk about press.
As we have here, Commissioner, what's the latest investigation into
Can we deal with GCOM issues only, please? Thank
quickly,
you.
as we
Can
have
we
you
deal
here,
with
sir,
GCOM issues only, please?
we will
Thank you.
not see you.
Can I take
for some
GCOM,
months.
and then we're going to talk about any other thing?
Is Hemnot Shaw still in the Guyana Police Force?
Who?
Hemnot Shaw.
I thought, he's an administrative.
He's still on
How are the
that.
investigations proceeding?
I said we are going to deal with GCOM only today, Mr. Shabbat.
But Commissioner, you don't brief us. We have not had a press conference with you.
But you're going to have that after, please.
When? Could you give us a time frame?
No, after the election, then we are going to deal with that. Can I continue? All right, thank you very much, media. Thank you.
So what's the opinion?
We are continuing our live coverage of voting by the discipline services here in Guyana and across the country. Specifically, I am at Base Camp in Ghana in Georgetown, where officers and ranks of the Ghana Defence Force will cast their ballots in these elections ahead of the September 1st polls. We already witnessed the voting, the casting of ballot by Chief of Defence Staff, Brigadier Omar Khan, and we are also now witnessing other ranks casting their ballots here at Camp in Ghana. In his exit interview to the media, the Chief of Defence Staff spoke about how orderly the process was. I think he was in fact one of the first persons to vote as soon as polls opened here this morning at 6 a.m., speaking about how orderly the process was and also speaking about ranks being afforded the opportunity to vote not only here in Georgetown but across the country. 10,000 ranks from the discipline services will vote in the elections today. Specific to the Ghana Defence Force, some 3,100 ranks will vote today. As I said, there are polling places across the country for these ranks to vote. And just to give you a recap of those places, right here at Base Camp in Ghana, over at Rheinfeldt in Georgetown at the Coast Guard, we also have the John Clark Military School at Takama, the observation post at Macapa, and the Garden of Eden Agri Corps, and Base Camp Soweo and Base Camp Stevenson. Also in the exit interview by the Chief of Defence Staff, we learned, and what is also standard, that for ranks of the GDF who are not able to vote today for one reason or another, they will be able to vote on September 1st when the general and regional elections are held. The Chief of Defence Staff explained that some ranks are overseas and training and they will return to Guyana, but for those who can be afforded voting abroad, they will vote abroad. The process here this morning is really no different from what we will observe on September 1st. Ranks arriving, ensuring that their names are on the list, proceeding to the election officials here on the ground. Their identity will be verified. Once that is done, they will be handed a ballot and they will be escorted or directed to a polling booth where they will cast their ballot before returning to the election official and depositing that ballot into the ballot box. We heard the Chief of Defence Staff also saying that no rank has been coerced to vote for any particular party. They will vote in their own interests here this morning. It's important to note that while the discipline services are voting ahead of the September 1 polls, that is to facilitate them being able to actually offer security services and work on election day across the country. But once they're finished voting here today, it does not mean that the ballot will be counted on the spot. The ballot will be placed into containers and sealed, and then those ballots will be intermixed on September 1st on election day. And those ranks who have not been able to cast their ballots today, just a reminder that they will also be afforded an opportunity to vote on September 1st. They will have to go to the local areas where they are registered, where their names are on the list, and they will be allowed to cast their ballot. So still observing the process here at Base Camp Ghana. As I said, ranks from the GDF, some 3,100, just over 3,100 ranks are registered to vote for the GDF, not only at Base Camp Ghana, but across the country. And just to give you those polling places once more, we have at the Rheinfeld Coast Guard, also right here in Georgetown, the John Clark Military School at Takama, the observation post at Macapa, Garden of Eden Agri Corps, the Base Camp Soweo, and Base Camp Stevenson. We'll continue our live coverage here, continuing to observe the process, and we will continue to engage officers as they exit the polls here this morning. I hand you back to Neil Marks.
Voting by the disciplined forces are continuing. Kurt Campbell there was reporting from Army Headquarters, Base Camp Ghana in Georgetown. And of the polling places today for the vote by the Army, the interesting posts for me are really the ones at Kaikan and Eteringbang in Region 7. Those are the communities closest to the border with Venezuela. Of course, Venezuela continuing its claim of the Essequibo region. The fact that voting is taking place in those areas, I mean, it's usual, but it's also a sign that Guyana is asserting its sovereignty over the Essequibo, which it has done since 1899, when that arbitral award was made. We're going over now to Vishani Raghuber at the police officers' mess.
We're coming to you again live from Police Headquarters Eve Leary, where the Commissioner of Police Clifton Hicken, alongside several members of the force's top brass, just cast their ballots. And joining me now is the Crime Chief, Mr. Wendell Blanham, who's just going to tell us what his experience voting was like. Mr. Blanham, if you can join me here.
Good morning.
Good morning, Mr. Blanham. Just tell us about the voting process.
Yes, good morning. I just cast my vote a few minutes ago, and I'm happy to report that the voting process was seamless and efficient. In other words, the process was simple, accurate, and verifiable.
Mr. Blanham, could you also tell us about, I know Mr. Hicken just spoke about it, but could you also tell us about the work that's ongoing across the country to ensure that police officers are given the opportunity to vote today?
Yes, as the Commissioner alluded, currently we have 1/4 of ranks who are voting, while some of their colleagues are holding the stations. So when this set complete their voting, then they're going to go and relieve the officers at the station, and those officers at the station will be present at the polling station to cast their votes.
Perfect. There you heard from the Crime Chief, Mr. Wendell Blanham. Just to remind you today, about 6,909 police officers are scheduled to vote. And today we have the voting of the disciplined services. That includes the Guyana Police Force, the Guyana Defense Force, and the Guyana Prison Service. Altogether, about 10,481 officers are expected to vote. Now, of course, if they aren't able to vote today in this special day of voting, specifically for members of the disciplined services, they will be allowed to vote on Election Day, September 1st, 2025, by going to their respective polling stations. We are continuing our live coverage of today's activity, that is the voting for the disciplined services, and my colleagues will be joining you from the Guyana Defense Force Base Camp Ghana and the Guyana Prison Service.
Are at the prison service headquarters here in Georgetown at Camp Street. It is now 6:25, that is 25 minutes since the ballot place here opened, and the Director of Prisons, Nicolon Elliott, was the first to cast his ballot in the September 1st general and regional elections. We spoke with him earlier, and he urged his officers to exercise their right to vote, and also said that there are arrangements in place to ensure all officers who are registered to vote get the opportunity to vote today at various prison locations across the country. That is Timeri, New Amsterdam, Lusignan, and Mazaruni. The prison director said voting should wrap up for the prison officers within the next 2 hours, since there are only 466 registered officers registered to vote in these elections. Ballot stations across the country opened at 6 a.m. and will close at 6 p.m. The disciplined forces are casting their ballot today. That is about 10 days ahead of the September 1 regional and general elections, because they will be on duty on that day. Voting is also taking place at a number of police force locations as well as the Ghana Defense Force location. Here we have quite a number of officers who lined up to cast their ballots, and to be eligible to vote in these elections, the members must be on the disciplined services roll. They must be 18 years and older before June 30th, 2025, and they must be a registered voter. Upon arrival at the polling places, they will present their ID card, but if they don't have the ID card, they can use their driver's license or passport to vote. In the event that they don't have either of those IDs, they can vote by an oath of identity. The ballots cast here today are not actually counted now, but they will be intermixed at certain ballot stations or polling stations on September 1 and then counted in the general and regional elections. A total of 10,481 disciplined forces members are registered to cast their ballot today, but in the event that they don't get the chance to do so, they can do so on September 1 where they are registered to vote. These elections are being closely monitored by a number of local and international observers. The international observers include the Carter Center, the European Union, and the Commonwealth, along with several other local groups. Again, I am Isanello Patwa. I'm coming to you live from the prison service headquarters at Camp Street here in Georgetown, where prison officers are casting their ballots today.
Isanello Patwa there from the headquarters of the Guyana Prison Service. 466 prison officers are registered to vote in these elections. The disciplined forces are voting ahead of the September 1st general and regional elections. Now, just a word on how the voting actually happens today. It's no different than what would happen on Elections Day, September 1st. So I just wanted to run through that quickly for you. Now, on arrival at the polling station, you would have noticed in our images, the officers would go up and then they would check their names on a list. Well, they have to do that to make sure that their name is actually on the list and they're at the right polling station to vote. Once they have done that, and the poll clerk at the polling station will check to ensure that their name and ID number are documented on that official list of electors, otherwise called the voters list. The poll clerk will then loudly announce the elector's serial number and name as documented on the voters list. They will then instruct the elector to take his or her national ID card or passport or whatever identity document they have to the assistant presiding officer, where a bulk of the work happens once they get to the assistant presiding officer. The assistant presiding officer, he or she, will compare information on the ID card with that of the voters list to verify that the person in front of them is the actual person registered to vote. They will inspect the electors' fingers to ensure that it is clean, because later on they will have to dip their index finger in the ink, so as a mark that they have voted. Once they've inspected the electors' fingers to ensure that there's no mark on it, to ensure that they haven't voted before, they will return the ID card to the voter, and then they will write the elector's serial number on the counterfoil or stub of the ballot paper to be issued at the top for general and at the bottom for elections, regional elections. They will then detach the ballot paper from the counterfoil by using a straight ruler aligned with the vertical perforation on that ballot paper. And then, importantly, they will stamp the 6-digit number, which is the official mark of the polling station, on the back of the ballot paper, at the top for general elections and at the bottom for regional elections. This is the continuing coverage on the newsroom of D-Day, the voting by members of the disciplined forces. Members of the Ghana Defense Force, the Ghana Police Force, and the prison service are voting in these elections. As I mentioned, one of the most important things in this entire process is that unique 6-digit number that will go on the ballot paper, behind the ballot paper, one for general and one for regional elections, is the 6-digit stamp, which is the official mark of the polling station. You might be wondering how they come up with that 6-digit number. Well, it's not a scientific process. They actually take numbers 1 to 9 and they place it in a bag, and then the officials, along with the agents, which are agents from the political parties who are there to witness the process, they will put those numbers in a bag and then they pull them out. Well, let's say, for example, someone pulls out the number 2. That number will be first recorded, and it's recorded from right to left. And I will continue to explain that, how they come up with that 6-digit number later on. We're turning over now to Army Headquarters, where we have Kurt Campbell reporting.
We're still bringing you live coverage from Base Camp Ghana here in Georgetown, where members of the Ghana Defense Force are casting their ballots in the 2025 elections, but ahead of the September 1 election day. We have been witnessing we've been witnessing soldiers making their way into the polling booths, into the polling stations, casting their ballots. Once more, a very orderly process here at Base Camp Ghana. And what I want to say is that the Ghana Elections Commission is in fact imposing its 200-yard restriction, where you have to be away from the polling station. So that's why we're not getting too close to the polling station or even getting inside of the polling stations this morning. We have to stay 200 yards from the polling station, as is the law. We're also not allowed to engage with the ranks voting here this morning, so as not to harass or intimidate or interfere with those ranks here this morning. Those ranks are allowed to vote with free will, in their own interests. We saw the Chief of Defense Staff saying earlier that no rank has been coerced to vote for any particular political party in these elections. Just over 3,000 ranks are to vote across the country at polling stations, not only at Base Camp Ghana, but across the country. And for those ranks who, for one reason or another, are not allowed to cast their ballots today, they will be able to vote on September 1. So we're still observing the process. We already witnessed voting by the Chief of Defense Staff, Brigadier Omar Khan. He engaged the media after exiting the polling station holding up his inked finger for all to see and encouraging other ranks to come out and exercise their franchise in these elections. Once more, to let you know, there are polling stations all across the country, ranks at border locations. We witnessed the Guyana Elections Commission flying out ballot boxes to interior locations this morning, where ranks not only from the Guyana Defense Force, but from the Guyana Police Force and the Guyana Prison Service, allowing and affording them the opportunity to vote. Right here at Base Camp in Guyana, we've also witnessed observers, specifically from the EU observation mission, observing the election. I want to say that the Guyana Elections Commission has also appointed ballot officers for the 3 agencies. So there is a specific ballot officer for the GDF, a ballot officer for the Guyana Police Force, and one for the Guyana Prison Service, and they will oversee balloting in these 3 agencies. Once the polls are closed today, and they will open from 6 a.m. this morning and will close at 6 p.m. as is standard this evening. Once ballot is closed, the ballots for the discipline services will not be counted today. Those ballots will be placed into sealed containers and kept, and they will be intermixed on September 1st on election day, and they will be counted along with the general voting population on September 1. So once again, a very orderly process here this morning. We're not allowed to get too close or even into the polling stations, as GCOM is imposing its 200 yards away from the polling station restriction. And that is by law. And we're also not allowed to engage or interfere with ranks voting here this morning. So we're going to continue to bring you live coverage from Base Camp in Ghana. My colleagues are also spread across different locations, different agencies, and we will continue to bring you comprehensive coverage on discipline services voting.
This is our continuing coverage of voting by the discipline forces ahead of elections on September 1st. As was mentioned by our reporters early on, when members of the discipline forces vote today, no one has a clue about who they have voted for. There are 6 parties contesting these elections, the main ones being the incumbent People's Progressive Party and the main opposition, APNU. Once they have voted, their ballot paper goes in a particular envelope. It's called the PE20 envelope, and that is secured. No one would know who they have voted for. So those ballot papers goes into the ballot papers go into that PE20 envelope. It is secured until September 1st, and sometime after the close of polls on September 1st, those envelopes are then emptied into ballot boxes at particular polling stations, and then they are counted with every other ballot that was cast in that particular polling station. And the ballots are intermixed with ballots cast in their particular districts. So in the elections, there are 10 electoral districts, which are comparative to the 10 administrative districts in Guyana. So, for example, the top brass of the police force voting in district number 4, their ballots would be intermixed with ballots at a selected polling station in district 4. So the ballots from district 4 can be intermixed with ballots in district 7 or 3, for example. So all of those ballots, again, cast in today's voting by members of the disciplined forces would remain secret, as would all other ballots cast in these elections. The votes being cast today will be intermixed at various polling stations across the country on September 1st. In Guyanese elections, we are not allowed to do an exit poll, so we can't ask anyone who they have voted for once they exit the polling place. We are now going over live to the Guyana Elections Commission as we continue coverage of voting by the disciplined forces.
For their appointment letters to their agents. Yes, we did have communication from the agents informing us that these are the persons appointed. Unfortunately, they didn't have their letters. So our ballot attendants, they're trained to ask for these letters of appointment. And we have been working with the parties and the attendants to ensure that the agents are participating in the process.
All stations open promptly?
Yes, well, I would say the
There you have President Dr. Irfan Ali here at the police headquarters, Eve Leary. The president is here where officers are voting. Police officers, that is. There you had the president of Guyana, Dr. Irfan Ali, just engaging with Deputy Chief Elections Officer Mr. Anil Giddings and members of the Guyana Police Force top brass. The president, who is seeking re-election with his party, the People's Progressive Party Civic, is here at the police headquarters, Eve Leary. He is here to observe the process, as the Commissioner of Police, Mr. Clifton Hicken, just said would be allowed. Of course, he's not allowed to head into any of the stations, but the president is here engaging with members of the top brass, and he has just been briefed by the Deputy Chief Elections Officer, Anil Giddings. Now, you heard earlier, just as the president arrived, Mr. Giddings providing an update to members of the media about what has happened since polls opened, and polls opened just about an hour ago at 6 a.m. He said there have been no major issues other than minor issues with some agents. Before he got into the details of those issues, the president, of course, arrived and the way was cleared for the president to come in. However, it is expected that when Mr. Giddings comes back outside, he will again engage the members of the media and provide additional information on what he was sharing before. Again, we're reporting to you live. I'm reporting to you live from police headquarters at Eve Leary, where members of the Guyana Police Force are voting today.
Mishani Raghaber there from police headquarters in Eve Leary. We just saw the arrival of the President, Commander-in-Chief of the Armed Forces, visiting the polling station there, along with, I believe, the Chief Scrutineer of the PPP, Zulfikar Mustafa, and he had Minister Vikram Bharat with him there as well. The President is just there to observe the process. This has happened before with other presidents and in other elections, so what he's doing is nothing unusual, just to observe the process. Like I mentioned, in Guyanese elections, we're not allowed to do an exit poll, so we, the media, we can't do that. We can't ask someone who they have voted for. The president can't do that. He can't ask police officers or soldiers who they have voted for. As the presidential candidate of the PPP, as all other presidential candidates, he can visit and observe the various polling stations, and we will likely see that throughout the day. The polls opened at 6 in the morning and they will go until 6 in the evening to ensure that every member of the disciplined forces who chooses to vote can do so. As we mentioned, there are 10,481 members of the disciplined forces registered to vote in these elections. From what we have observed from the pictures that we were seeing earlier, voting turnout seems to be high for the disciplined forces, as it usually is. Where the president is at the police headquarters to observe the vote. There are 6,909 police officers who are registered to vote in these elections. The top brass of the police force has already voted. We saw the police commissioner voting, the crime chief, Wendell Blanham. I believe we saw as well Mr. Errol Watts and others having cast their ballot. In case you're wondering why you aren't able to see them doing the actual vote or entering the polling station, that's because as media, we're not allowed beyond a certain point. Usually for presidential candidates, there is an exception. We may be able to see them in the polling station and behind the voting compartment voting, but in this case, we're not allowed to go further than you can see on your screen. As a reminder, we are covering the vote by the disciplined forces today ahead of general elections on September 1st. As I was saying, one of the most important things on the ballot paper is a unique 6-digit stamp, which is actually created not before the voting takes place, but actually on the very day of the voting. So each polling station would have to have a unique 6-digit number, and that number is created on the morning of voting. So just before polls begin, the presiding officer must ensure that this 6-digit number is created. It is then stamped on the ballot paper at the top for general elections and at the bottom for regional elections. I attempted to explain earlier how this 6-digit number is created before we went to live coverage outside of the Army. So I just wanted to let you know how that 6-digit number is created for each polling station. So before polls open, the presiding officer is the one who's responsible for ensuring that this is done. So how do they come up with the number? Well, it is selected, but now I want to turn you over to an opposition commissioner on the Guyana Elections Commission who is at the Army headquarters.
That's why I'm raising the concern. Good. Thanks.
Apart from that, any other issues you've observed or heard about?
No, I haven't heard about anything. In fact, I'm moving right up the East Coast, up to Maikoni police station, to get a sense of what is taking place. And only then will I be able to say if there's anything other than what I've reported here.
But so far, everything is smooth.
I won't say smooth. I will say that so far, what I see, the activity seems to be normal. I don't know if it's smooth.
How was the process here at UDF?
I just answered. Okay. It looks normal.
Looks normal.
Right.
Thank you. Thank you.
Welcome.
We weren't able to get much there from Mr. Desmond Trotman. He's an opposition-nominated commissioner on the Guyana Elections Commission. As I mentioned earlier, President Irfan Ali and other presidential candidates would be visiting polling stations to have a look at how the vote is going on, and members of the Elections Commission are also doing that, including senior. We saw the Deputy Chief Elections Officer, Anil Giddings, speaking with reporters at police headquarters. We expect the chairman of the Elections Commission, Justice Retired Claudette Singh, would be doing the same, along with the Chief Elections Officer, Vishnu Prasad. We haven't seen them as yet. They're probably at other polling stations observing the vote. So as I was explaining just before we went to Mr. Trotman, a unique 6-digit number is created for each polling station. Just before polls open at the polling station, the presiding officer will supervise the process for the creation of that number. What they do is that they prepare 10 slips of paper, 0 to 9. They put it in a bag, and then they bring 6 people among the elections day staff and elections agents selected by political parties, and they will pick out 6 numbers out of that bag and then register it from right to left, and that's how they come up with the unique ID number. They will then configure the stamp that they have, stamp it on a waste paper to make sure that everything is in working order, and each polling station will therefore have a unique number. So just that simple process. Some polling stations can have the same 6-digit number. It just depends on what numbers come out of that bag. So as soon as someone selects a number, they will put that number back in the paper. So for example, if someone picks out 6 from the bag, that is recorded from the right to the left, and then they put that number back into the bag, shaken up again, then somebody else comes and selects another number. They could very well pull out the same 6, so they go 6, 6, and whatever until they achieve 6 numbers, and that determines the unique number for each polling station. As a reminder, we're covering the voting of members of the disciplined forces ahead of elections in Guyana on September 1st. The number of polling stations for voting by members of the disciplined forces is obviously not as many as will be on the actual elections day. Some polling stations, some electoral districts have more polling stations than others, obviously. Region 4 being the one with the largest amount of polling stations today, D-Day, as members of the disciplined forces vote. As Kurt Campbell mentioned earlier in the broadcast, the vote by the Army is also taking place at remote locations, included at Kaikan and Etteringban on the border with Venezuela. The vote by the prison service is taking place at main locations. We saw earlier the chief prison officer voting at prison headquarters there in Georgetown. And we are covering this vote by members of the disciplined forces from Georgetown and outlying communities because this is where most polling stations are. Earlier in our broadcast, we noted that the polls opened at 6 a.m. as is required, and so far the voting process seems to have been conducted very smoothly. At least that's the report from everyone that we have spoken to thus far. We spoke with the Army Chief, Brigadier Omar Khan, the Police Commissioner, and others who have reported that the process so far is going smoothly. As I mentioned, no one is allowed to ask those who have voted who they voted for. It is not allowed. No one can ask them that. So we will not know who members of the disciplined forces vote for, not at the end of today or otherwise, because in Guyana the ballot is secret, as I believe it is across the world. So what happens with the ballots that were cast today, that are being cast today? Well, as I mentioned before, if you were not on the broadcast, the ballot papers after the soldiers or the police officers or the prison officers vote, it goes into a special envelope called the PE20 envelope. That envelope is secured until September 1st. And once people vote at the various polling stations, those envelopes are then emptied into selected ballot boxes, and they are intermixed or mixed up, if you will, with the other ballots cast at that polling station. and then all of those ballots are counted. So there is no distinction about whether this ballot came from the army or this ballot came from the police force. Those counting the votes will not know that. And so that's the intermixing process. So the ballots that are cast at particular polling stations in District 4 or Region 4 will be placed into ballot boxes at selected locations within that region to be counted after the close of polls on September 1st. So we're continuing live coverage of elections 2025 here in Guyana. Members of the disciplined forces vote ahead of the general population because many of them will be engaged in work before on polling day. So they're being given the opportunity to vote before every other citizen registered to vote, thus in the elections. What you're seeing on screen is members of the disciplined forces lined up to cast their ballots. These are members of the Guyana Police Force, and this is the police headquarters at Evelary. The camera is set at this particular polling station where President Irfan Ali is observing the process. Observers are allowed to have a look at the process to ensure that everything is going smoothly. As we can see, the line is pretty solid there. So far we've been seeing the high voter turnout by members of the disciplined forces at all the locations we had a look at. Our reporters have been at Army Headquarters, Camp Aingana, at the headquarters of the prison service, and here, as you're seeing on screen, at the Guyana Police Force at Evelary. We expect that after the president after the president has a look at the process here at police headquarters, he will proceed to other polling stations. We expect he will go to the Army headquarters, Camp Aingana, to observe the vote there. We are not sure if he will offer comments at the police headquarters here, but we're definitely on the lookout for that, and we will bring you live coverage in case he does give comments on how the process is at that polling station. This is the newsroom, and we are covering live the vote by members of the disciplined forces in Guyana's 2025 general and regional elections scheduled for September 1. 10,481 members of the disciplined forces are registered to vote in these elections. The voting process today is the same as will occur on elections day. There are no special arrangements or no different arrangements in place for this vote. Again, you're looking at live images from police headquarters Evelary, where members of the police force are voting. As a reminder, members of the police force include the immigration department, so you may be seeing some of them in the line as well. Voting continues all day until 6 p.m. when polls close. All of that time is allowed to ensure that everyone who is registered to vote today can cast their ballot. This is the newsroom, and we're covering elections 2025. Today, in particular, voting the members of the disciplined forces. As we look at those images, I wanted to remind you of some of the election offenses in these elections. And now, election offenses are actions and practices that are prohibited by law for purposes of achieving free and fair elections. Certain actions committed before, during, or after the elections could be deemed as election offenses. A voter, a candidate, an election official, or security personnel can be prosecuted for committing election offenses. Now, what happens if a person commits an election offense? Well, simply they can go to jail. So what are some of the election offenses that someone can go to jail for? Well, one of the things is that you can't be registered to vote more than once, although that might not be entirely the work of the voter themselves, but definitely if you attempt to vote more than once, then you can go to jail. You cannot also vote in the name of another person, so you can't go at a polling station and pretend to be someone else. You can go to jail for that. Now, as I was mentioning, we can't go beyond a certain distance in the polling station, so that's why you're not actually able to see the voting taking place. There at Evelary, see that, but here we can go to President Irfan Ali, who has just observed the process there at police headquarters.
Yes, from what I've seen, it's a very smooth process, very efficient process. You can also see the notices telling voters about the secrecy of the ballot. So what I've seen this morning is a very smooth and efficient process.
You are Mr. Zulfikar. What have you hearing from your agents around the country today?
Well, you know, voting would have just started, so we have not really had an assessment around the country, but from this morning, the opening of polls, of course, the Zulfi would have had a report on the opening of polls, and things would have gone smoothly so far. And we are expecting it to stay this way. The process is very, very efficient. You have the observers in there. You have some party agents in there. So, this process
on an average, how long do you think someone should take in casting his ballot from the time he or she enters the polling area to the time they actually put the X in there?
Well, it's a difficult question. If you're giving my opinion,
Yes.
you're asking. I think that in most cases on E-Day, looking at the historical time it will take, maximum within 2 to 3 minutes that process is over.
And you saw this morning?
Well, you know, I did not pay attention to the turnaround time at voters this morning. I was just paying attention to the process, listening to the announcements, listening to the presiding officers and so on, calling out the ID number, looking at people using the folio, observing that. So that is what I paid attention to. But I'm sure as it's very early as the process pick up, it's going to be much faster.
Mr. President, the Deputy Chief Election Officer mentioned some early issues in some areas with party agents and their certificates. Is that something you heard?
Yeah, that is something where some parties or did not give the certificate to their agents, their accreditation. So what I heard from the Deputy Chief Elections Office is that their name was on a master list. That is what he said, but the party did not fulfill the responsibility of giving them that appointment.
That's not the case with the PPP.
No. The PPP is a tested and oiled machinery. We have checks and balances. We are always in a position of readiness.
Mr. President, what assurances have you gotten from the joint services that they will be able to deal with any likely unrest, given what we had seen stemming from the Adriana autopsy day into the night, where there was looting and other forms of criminality?
Yeah, Shabral, so the joint services, they have activated their mechanism a number of weeks now. They're having their joint meetings, and they have assured me that they have every system in place. They've assured me that they have the equipment, the manpower, and they have a well laid out system to deal with any issues if they arise. We don't believe that this will be the case, but they are prepared. They are prepared for any eventuality.
Mr. President, the voting process has essentially started in these elections today. There's still a lot of young people and other people out there who are still thinking about whether they will vote. What word would you say to them this morning?
I can't campaign on this premises
What word
now.
would you say to those who are thinking of not voting?
No, I would not campaign. I would respect that, but I would say just one thing, that I can speak for the party I represent, that we have laid out a comprehensive plan. You can judge if you're going to do anything in life. You have to look at track record, you have to look at experience, you have to look at commitment, you have to look at trustworthiness, you have to look at delivery and performance. When you look at that and look at the plans for the future, I think there is just one clear choice. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. President. There we just heard from.
This is the newsroom, and we are covering the vote by the disciplined forces ahead of elections on September 1st, 2025. Voting started at 6 in the morning across the country. There are 10 electoral districts with 83 polling stations opened today for voting by members of the disciplined forces. So from Akero Police Station in Region 1 all the way to Takama in Region 10, voting is continuing by the police, the army, and members of the prison service. We are continuing our live coverage, and we will turn over to Kurt Campbell, who is at Army Headquarters, Camp Aingana.
We're continuing our live coverage of voting by the disciplined services across Guyana. We were just hearing from President Dr. Irfanati giving a comment to members of the media there over at police headquarters at Ivleary. I am currently at Base Camp Aingana here in Georgetown, where we are also anticipating that the President will make a visit to observe the voting process here at Base Camp Aingana. Right here, there are about 3 polling stations in this one polling place, and we're seeing some lines here this morning, ranks lined up waiting to go into the polling stations and cast their ballots. Of course, these lines are expected will not last all day, though polls will be open until 6 p.m. this evening, and voting started at 6 a.m. this morning. We witnessed already voting by the Chief of Defense Staff, Brigadier Omar Khan, and the Brigadier speaking to the media after exiting those polls, commenting that the process was very orderly, and also thanking all those involved, the election officials. We also witnessed here, observing the process this morning, observers from international election observer missions, specifically the EU observer mission here on the ground this morning. Just to really just recap the process, what's happening here this morning, it's not unusual. The disciplined services, the police, the army, the prison officers, they all vote at least 1 week before the general elections, where the public will vote on September 1. And you may ask why the disciplined services are voting ahead, and that is because they are required to provide security service on E-Day, on Election Day, which is September 1st this year. Just let me also say that for the ranks from the Guyana Defence Force and the other discipline services who are not able to cast their ballots today on August 22nd, which is dedicated as Discipline Service Voting Day. They will be able to vote along with the general population on September 1st. However, they will not be voting at these specific polling stations located at designated places for the GDF. They will have to vote in the areas where they are registered to vote. Additionally, the ballots cast by members of the discipline services will not be counted today. They will be placed into secure folders and secure containers, and they will be kept until September 1st, election day, and they will be intermixed with the balloting of the general population and counted. That is so that we are not able to determine how exactly the voting for the discipline services went. As I said, we heard from President Dr. Irfan Ali at the police headquarters a short while ago, and we are awaiting his arrival here at Base Camp Ghana, where we will also see him observing the process and, if possible, secure a comment from the president. We're also expecting top election officials to visit these polling places. The chief elections officer, the chairman of the Guyana Elections Commission, retired Justice Claudia Singh. We're all anticipating their arrival here to observe the process. Earlier, we spoke to a commissioner on the Guyana Elections Commission, Commissioner Desmond Trotman. He stayed away from saying that the process was orderly. He would only say that the process was normal. He did raise some objections to some police officers and the way they were dressed, though they were dressed in their uniform. And he observed the process along with observers. And as I said, we're anticipating the arrival of the president. I can hear his sirens in the distance, so he will arrive here shortly.
This is the newsroom. We're covering the vote by the disciplined forces today, August 22nd, 2025. As Kurt Campbell mentioned, the president is visiting some polling stations to observe the process. He was just at police headquarters and is making his way to Army headquarters, Base Camp Ghana. At polling places, there are certain people who are allowed to be at the polling station. So apart from the voters, of course, you'd have polling station officials, official party agents, and the security officers, but other categories of persons are also allowed to be at the polling station. And those include candidates in the election, the president being the presidential candidate in these elections, returning officers and their deputies. Returning officers are basically the persons who manage an entire electoral district. They're also allowed to be at polling stations, along with the candidates, members of the Guyana Elections Commission and its secretariat, the secretariat being the part of GCOM that actually carries out these elections. Other persons allowed to be there include domestic and international observers and persons accompanying voters with disabilities. And so candidates are among the 5 categories of persons who are allowed to be at polling stations. We can see there President Irfan Ali arriving at Base Camp Ghana, the headquarters of the Guyana Elections Commission, where we have Kurt Campbell reporting.
Hi. Sure, no problem. Go ahead now. Yeah. So we just witnessed the arrival of President Dr. Irfan Ali here at Base Camp Ghana, the headquarters of the Guyana Defence Force, Alongside him, the Minister of Agriculture, Zulfikar Mustafa, and they've made their way into the auditorium here, one of the polling stations, one of 3 polling stations here at Base Camp Ghana. And he has gone inside to observe the process, as he is allowed to do as president. I should say that what we notice is that the president did not engage any of the ranks here on the ground, who are all lined up waiting to cast their ballots. His arrival and his observation will not put a pause on the voting process. The voting process will continue smoothly and in its normal fashion, as we have been witnessing this morning. Like we will stand by to likely get a comment from the president once he exit the polling station. But once more, a very orderly process here this morning. I'm sure the president will concur once he exits the polling station. He already visited the headquarters of the Guyana Police Force at Evelary, and he's now observing what's happening here with the soldiers, with the army at Base Camp in Ghana. As I said, also accompanying the president is the Minister of Agriculture, Zulfikar Mustafa, and some other members of his team. The discipline services are voting ahead of the September 1st, 2020 elections. Some 3,100 ranks from the Guyana Defense Force will vote today, but in total, well, they are on the list to vote, but in total, over 10,000 ranks from across the discipline services are all registered to vote in these elections. For ranks who are not able to vote today, they will be afforded that opportunity with the general population on September 1st. 2025. We're also witnessing the arrival of some officials from the Guyana Elections Commission here on the ground.
Kurt Campbell reporting there from the Army headquarters as soldiers, the police, and members of the Guyana Prison Service vote ahead of elections on September 1st. In case you were wondering, the voting process for the disciplined forces is the same as will obtain on elections day. The polls opened across Guyana at 6 a.m. and will continue until 6 p.m. So if a person does not make it in the line by 6 p.m., they would not be allowed to vote. So at 6 p.m., if you are in a line, then you would be allowed to vote. But if you come after 6 p.m. and you try to join a line, well, then you'll not be allowed to vote in the elections. We expect this voting by members of the disciplined forces to conclude before 6 p.m. It's just 10,481 of them to vote, and there are 83 polling stations stretched across the 10 electoral districts, 1 to 10. And so, as I mentioned, the voting process is not different than what would obtain on elections day. It's basically an 8-step process. We can now switch to Army headquarters, where President Irfan Ali is emerging after observing voting there.
Very efficient. You have the GCOM staff in there, different observers. We have seen the observation team around this morning, and also the agents. So I think that things are moving very smoothly, very efficiently at the moment.
Given what you've seen at the police and what you've just seen here at Camp Ghana, would you comment on whatever's happening? I know you said it's efficient and moving smoothly.
Yeah, well, you know, like every elections, this morning there were 1 and 2 issues that had to be sorted out. Zulfi here, representing the party, would have been a part of that, whereas some of the parties did not issue their letter to their agents. Although the deputy chief elections officer did explain to me that their names were on a master list. But you know, the party is supposed to issue that letter. So they had that challenge that was sorted out this morning. But other than that, from all the reports we're having across the country, there is nothing, nothing to create any uneasiness at the moment.
All right, as Guyana heads to the polls on September 1, what can you say to the general populace given how today is going?
Well, first of all, I want to say that, elections are part of what make us a democracy. Elections are not there to divide us. Elections are not there to set us against each other. Elections are part of the richness of a democratic process. And I want us to understand that, first of all. And then for us to, by understanding that, to exercise our right to choose a government of our choice in a peaceful manner, in a dignified manner, and in a way that is respectful to ourselves, respectful to our country, and one in which we celebrate democracy. Elections are a form of celebrations, a celebration of democracy itself. So that will be my first message. And from what I've seen today, and I'm sure the GCOM staff also will be taking notes of what can be done more efficiently. We also, from the party level, will be looking at the entire system throughout today to see whether there are anything that we believe can be done more efficiently, and we will definitely raise those.
President Ali, apart from your observation, can you say if the party has agents at all of the polling stations for the display?
Yes, we have agents at all of the stations, and Minister Zulfi can tell you that. Right, and he would also tell you that he would have had a report from them this morning, and periodically during the day, we have an understanding of what's happening.
All the stations meaning across the country?
Across the country.
Yes, sir. But sir, at this time, we've noticed in the media there are warships from the United States and headed to Venezuela, of which we have an issue with the border. Would you want to comment on
No,
that?
not at this time, not at this time, but I'll say to you that as president, part of my duty is to ensure that our sovereignty is maintained and that we continue to live in peace here. And, we have always said that we support this region being a zone of peace, and we understand the importance of our sovereignty, and we'll do everything to protect our sovereignty.
Mr. President, we see at least one party moving to the court complaining about being omitted from the ballots and their symbols in 3 regions, and for another party, 4 regions. Is this a concern for the PPP?
No, it's not. This is not a concern for the PPP. I think that they have sought recourse on a matter that they believe that they should, and they've gone to the courts, and the courts will deal with that. Our party is contesting all of the region, the geographic seats, and we are contesting nationally in all of the regions.
Are you concerned that it would stall in any way the elections?
I'm not concerned. I think that some may have the belief, or they may have the desire, or they may have the root, the genesis of what they are attempting might be very well that. But I don't have any concerns about stalling of the elections. I think that our court systems are meant to deal with these issues. GCOM has made its position clear, and we are just concentrating now on these polls. I know the joint services is also well prepared. They have given me a full brief of their preparedness to ensure that we have a peaceful elections and to ensure that elections are conducted and people conduct themselves within the confines of the laws.
Do you believe your party has the support of the joint services?
I want to say that Julia, we have worked in partnership with the joint services. The joint services know they can trust us. They know that we are committed to what we say we'll do. We have never lied to the joint services. We have never taken away anything from the joint services. We have shown them, we have supported them, supported accelerated promotion, supported increases in the salary bands, increase in salaries, more education and training opportunities for the joint services, expanded support for families, and we have laid out a series of initiatives that we'll pursue in the future to further improve their life, their working condition, and ensure that they live a life of dignity and honor.
Where are you heading to next, and are you going to go to the hinterland regions today?
That's a very good question. My head is still operating where I have to be. Hopefully, I can be as many places as possible. I'm still on the campaign trail, so we have a lot of campaign activities also today. So it's finding the right balance, and we have a team. We have a team. Zulfi is leading our work up here with GCOM. We have Vikram Bharat, and in every region we have party leaders. So we are the team. The team is there in full force.
Mr. President, one more question. Could you comment on the Carter Center pre-election report that spoke about the use of state resources in these campaigns, the closure of accounts by certain local banks?
I first of all, let me say on state resources, absolutely not true. We are incumbent, all right, and these accusations are always there. But our party, as you know, might have been the only party that would have had so many fundraisers. You have seen it all across the country. So we have been able to raise enough resources with the love and support of the people, with the love and support of our supporters and members. And we have been able to raise enough resources to efficiently carry out our campaign and our work for these elections. So there is no need for state resources, and state resources have not been deployed to support our campaign. The second thing is on what you asked?
The win and closure of
the closure of account. That's it. Listen, we have a banking association. Corresponding banking relationship is important. Banks don't operate in isolation of a global financial system. Our financial institutions are part of a global financial system, and that is what people don't understand. This is not a government giving instruction. These are banks operating within their global standards and within a global financial system that can penalize them. And so I don't see the big challenge. I warned this president that, knowing the international system, that there are consequences. Even politically exposed persons, they have a far different threshold to clear when you're doing banking. When you're doing any financial transaction, there's something called PEP, and there's a different threshold for PEPs, politically exposed persons. That is how the international system works. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Thank you.
Just heard from President.
This is the newsroom, and it's Friday, August 22nd, 2025, 1.5 hours after polls opened across the country for members of the disciplined forces to vote. They're voting in 10 administrative regions at 83 polling stations, from Region 1, the Akero Police Station, all the way to Takama in Region 10, and on our border locations in the west, Kaikan and Atteringban in Region 7, and New River on the border with Suriname, and many other polling stations across the country. We just witnessed comments from President Irfan Ali as he visits various polling stations to observe the process. The president there saying that so far he has observed a smooth process. He described elections and voting as a celebration of democracy. Guyana goes to the polls on September 1st to elect a new government. President Irfan Ali hoping for re-election and very confident of that. We can now turn over to Vishani Raghuber, who is at police headquarters covering the vote there.
quite a busy morning indeed. We are reporting live on the Discipline Services voting, which is unfolding today, Friday, August 22nd, 2025. Now, I've been reporting from the police headquarters here at Eve Leary, Georgetown, where police ranks have been voting since 6 a.m. This morning. Now, to remind you, about 6,909 police ranks are expected to vote today, and they're part of the overall 10,481 discipline services officers that will be voting or that are expected to vote all across the country today. Now, here the voting started with the Commissioner of Police, Clifton Hicken, casting his ballot, and then Mr. Hicken engaged members of the media. According to him, systems are in place to allow police ranks to vote throughout the day, and that will be done in phases. That is, some ranks will vote first, and then as they head back to the stations and elsewhere, other ranks will continue and will come out to vote. Now, my colleagues have been reporting from elsewhere across Georgia where the other discipline services have been voting. Like I mentioned, it has been quite a busy and interesting morning so far with the discipline services voting. I'm Vishani Ragwir. Stay with us for live coverage.
2 envelopes, one with the name and ID number of the elector on the outside, and the inner envelope containing that ballot with just the region where that officer is assigned or registered on the official list of electors. Upon the close of poll today, when those ballots are returned, those ballots will be sorted by the respective district, and they will be placed in secure custody according to district. We have gazetted the list of polling stations where those ballots will be intermixed on election day, which is the 1st of September. So those ballots will be counted in the respective district.
This is the newsroom. You are listening to Yolanda Ward, the Public Relations Officer of the Guyana Elections Commission, as she was explaining the voting process today and what happens after. Just before our feed was interrupted, she was explaining that the votes cast today by members of the disciplined forces will not be counted today. Rather, they will be intermixed with other votes cast on September 1st in the respective districts in which the officers vote, and will be counted along with other votes cast in the districts at the end of voting on September 1st, when Guyanese vote for the party of their choice. There are 6 parties contesting these elections. I was mentioning earlier that President Irfan Ali is visiting various polling stations to observe the process, describing the election as a celebration of democracy. No campaigning can take place with members of the disciplined forces today. So when the president visits, he can whisper in somebody's ear, vote for the PPP. One of the reporters baited him early on to talk about that, and of course he didn't miss the opportunity to talk about what the government has done for the disciplined forces, but in particular no campaigning or no canvassing can take place at the place of poll. It's one of the elections offenses. Candidates can also be charged under Guyana's elections law, the main one being the Representation of the People Act, otherwise called ROPA. So a voter, a candidate, an election official, or security personnel can be prosecuted for committing election offenses. You are looking at live pictures as members of the Guyana Police Force vote there at police headquarters, Eve Leary. Now, I was mentioning earlier some election offenses for which people can go to jail. Well, that's voting more than once at the same location on election day. You cannot vote more than once on election day, and the Guyana Elections Commission has been at pains to explain that that is virtually impossible to vote twice in the election. Anyone who attempts to do so can go to jail. If you attempt to vote in the name of another person or a fictitious name, that's an election offense. As I was mentioning, canvassing for voters or attempting to get persons to vote for either that party or this party is an election offense. No one can molest or interfere with an elector within 200 yards of a polling station. No one can force a person to vote in a particular way. You can't compel someone to vote for a particular party. It is an election offense. No one can try to vote before the polls open. So on election day, sometimes you would see the lines very long, even before the 6 a.m. opening of polls. You can't say, man, I come early, I gotta go to work, I gotta travel, I wanna vote now. That can't happen. You have to wait until polls open at 6 a.m. and then you have 12 hours within which to vote, because the place of voting closes at 6 p.m. If you're in a line at that time, you will be able to vote. So you can't attempt to vote before or after the poll is officially opened and closed. You are also not allowed to remove or deface a lawfully displayed official electoral notice or election campaign poster. That's also an election offense. You can't, the sample of the ballot paper, you can't make a copy of that and do your own thing with it. That's an election offense. You can't tamper with ballot boxes. So the list of election offenses is pretty long. So make sure you know what the election offenses are so that you don't commit any and go to jail. You're looking at pictures at Police Headquarters Evelary, where voting is continuing by members of the Guyana Police Force. They are voting ahead of elections on September 1st because they will most likely be assigned duties on that day. The Guyana Police Force is the largest block of voters on this day, called D-Day, voting by the disciplined forces. 6,909 members of the Guyana Police Force are registered to vote. They are doing so at various locations across the country. There are polling stations in all 10 electoral districts, which correspond to Guyana's administrative districts. A lot of the polling stations for the police are, and they go all across the country, as I was explaining a bit earlier. So they are polling stations, importantly, at border locations, Kaikan and Atteringban in Region 7, just across from Venezuela, and New River, just across from Suriname in the east. There are 83 polling stations for members of the disciplined forces to vote today. 10,481 are on the voters list for the disciplined forces. They vote much the same as everyone else will do on September 1st. There is a particular process by which that voting takes place, and so everyone must follow the rules if they want to vote. There's an 8-step process which starts off when you arrive at the polling station and it's your time to vote. You'll have to present a valid form of identification. In most cases, that will be your national ID card or your passport or a driver's license. If you don't have any of those, no problem, but GECOM is of course encouraging voters to walk with a valid form of identification, an ID card, passport, or a driver's license. If you do not have any of those, well, no problem, because you will still be able to vote by taking an oath of identity, officially swearing that you are the name of the person on the voters list at the elections. Yes, so yeah, that's step one. So I was saying, sorry, that the oath of identity is essentially you swearing that you're the person that appears on the voters list if you don't have a valid form of ID. At the polling place, they have what is called a folio, or essentially a folder with all of your details, including a picture photograph. So the elections officials at the polling station will be able to look at that folio and say, hey, Neil Marks, and he looks like this. And they'll have a look at you and confirm all your details, and then you will swear to it if you don't have a valid form of ID. We can now show you some brief comments from President Irfan Ali, who is observing the vote on this Friday, August 22nd. He was at the headquarters of the Ghana Police Force, and then he went over to base camp in Ghana, the headquarters of the Ghana Defense Force, and we just saw him entering a polling station at the Ghana Prison Service Admin Building. Rewinding there, we see him being greeted by Nicola Elliott, the prison director of prisons. He voted first in these elections. We saw him earlier in the coverage, and there Mr. Elliott is guiding President Ali into the polling station. So President Irfan Ali there observing voting by the disciplined forces. As I mentioned, he was earlier at the headquarters of the police force and the army. The president described earlier, we heard him in interviews, that the process has so far been smooth, with no major complaints coming from his party agents on the ground at those 83 polling stations across the country. Voting is taking place from 6 and until 6 p.m. this evening. We have been covering since the opening of polls, and none of our reporters also have reported any untoward incidences at any of the stations where they are. As I said, the voting process by members of the disciplined forces is no different than what will obtain on September 1st. When a person arrives at the polling station, they will first identify themselves. I explained the process earlier, by which they do so by having a valid form of ID, either a national ID card, a passport, or a driver's license. If they have none of those, well, their details are in a folder, a colored photo of them and all of their details, and they can swear that they are that person identified there, and they would be allowed to vote. Their fingers are checked before they vote to ensure that there's no mark indicating that they have not voted before. Voters are also encouraged to ensure that they see the official 6-digit number at the back of the ballot paper, at the top and at the bottom. Remember, these are general and regional elections, so the voter can vote twice, or are encouraged to vote at the top and at the bottom. And then after they ensure that that 6-digit number is there, then they can go to the polling booth and mark their ballot. Of course, that ballot is done in secret. Then they stain their index finger with the ink, deposit their ballot in the box, and then leave the polling station. This is the newsroom, and we are covering the vote by members of the disciplined forces today, Friday, August 22nd, ahead of general elections on September 1st. Those voting today are members of the Ghana Defence Force, members of the Ghana Police Force, and members of the Ghana Prison Service. Early on, the Army Chief, Brigadier Omar Khan, voted and spoke with reporters about the process.
Ranks are deployed and are voting. My experience just now was a very organized and smooth one, and I want to thank all those who were responsible for ensuring that this was done successfully, at least when I wasn't there. I do not anticipate any issue because all soldiers are expressing and exercising the democratic right to participate in this beautiful and important process. As you know, traditionally the joint services would vote before the general public would vote, and that is scheduled for the 1st of September. Throughout the day, soldiers will decide without coercion, vote as their right is so deemed to each one of them. And I expect no issue throughout the day. I believe we will have an update for you as the day progresses. Thank you so much.
If you could help, how many voting places are in Ghana here?
We have 3, I believe. 3, yes. And you could have that. Also, the press is welcome to.
Your people at the border locations, how well are they outfitted, or how well is GCOM prepared to have them vote and vote effectively and efficiently?
Yes. Those places are expected to start at this time also. We have all system in place. GCOM and their staff would have done the necessary work. Transportation and the necessary material and equipment would have been pre-positioned. Less for the ballots, which were escorted by the Ghana Police Force, along with members from the GCOM.
Help me to understand what plans you have in place for officers who may not be able to vote today.
Yes, so we have a number of officers who are overseas, courses, etc., and they will be allowed to vote on the 1st of September.
And that's through the consulates, or?
Some are returning to Guyana, some are out, and those who can be afforded to vote overseas will be allowed to, within the regulations.
Are you missing the servicemen who some of them would have been voting alongside you this morning? Do you think it is indeed an honor to them that so much time has elapsed, we don't know what happened to them there? They weren't given the opportunity to vote today?
Servicemen who
died in the helicopter crash?
Well, certainly, a death always impacts in many ways. And what we have today is those who will remember them and vote in their service, in the name of their service, and what they would have done for Guyana. The Ghana Defence Force is it's just a subset of the population. We come from the youth, and we are happy within this democratic process. Everyone is given the opportunity to exercise that in their own individual assessment and how they vote. And I'm happy that we are going to be doing just that, like we've been doing over the years.
But have you made it clear to your officers prior to today's voting that they are allowed to vote for any party of their choice, or has the army been pushing one party's agenda?
There's no particular agenda. Every day, every officer on rank gets up, put on their boots and clothes, and ready to serve the people of Guyana. Every soldier has a right to exercise their vote as they see fit. There's no coercion, there's no influence, and all the soldiers that are here are doing just that, and across the force, and across the country.
Thank you, sir.
Chief, can we get a picture of your Brigadier Omar Khan, the Chief of Staff of the Ghana Defence Force, speaking there, displaying his index finger as having voted this August 22nd, 2025, voting by members of the disciplined forces. The polls opened just about 2 hours ago and will run until 6 p.m., where 10,481 members of the disciplined forces are registered to vote. We are noticing lines at all of the polling stations, so members of the disciplined forces queuing up to exercise their franchise, 6 parties on the ballot. We also see observers at the polling stations, local and foreign observers checking this process. Everyone that we have spoken to so far have said the process is smooth and without incident. Again, President Irfan Ali describing the election as a celebration of democracy and also saying that the process is smooth. He has visited all the main locations of the disciplined forces. So he was first at police headquarters Ivleri, then at base camp in Ghana, the headquarters of the GDF, and also on Camp Street, where there's the administration of the Guyana Prison Service. Other candidates are doing the same at other locations. We are covering these elections from Region 4, voting today by members of the disciplined forces, because this is the district, the electoral district with the most polling stations. I wanted to read out for you some of the polling stations in the various regions. So in Region 1, there's the Cairo Police Station, Arakaka, Baramita, Matthews Ridge, Port Kaijuma, Morawana, Yarakita, and Mabaruma. Those are the polling stations in Region 1 at the tip of Guyana there. In Region 2, voting is taking place at the Charity Police Station, at the Central Police Station, at the mess hall downstairs. Sorry, I'm mixing that up. That's actually Region 2. So yes, at the Charity Police Station, the Anna Regina Police Station, Base Camp Anna Regina, the Laguan Police Station, Lenora Police Station, Lagrange Police Station, Macoria Police Station, those in Region 3, of course, and there are many others, 83 in total across the electoral districts. On the border, we have Kaikan and Etteringbang in Region 7 and New River on the border with Suriname. As our newsroom team has been covering the voting by members of the disciplined forces, we can go now to Vishani Raghavir and Kurt Campbell. They are at police headquarters, Ivleri.
Thank you, Neil. We're winding down our live coverage this morning of voting by the disciplined services across the country. I am joining now my colleague Vishani Raghavir here at police headquarters at Ivleri, coming from the Army headquarters at Base Camp in Ghana, where we both observe the process in the separate places. We have other colleagues in other locations observing the process, but I will wrap up this live with Vishani talking about our observations this morning at both locations. If I can start with the Guyana Defence Force. The voting started promptly at 6 a.m. this morning. Of course, it will last until 6 p.m. this evening. First in line to vote, the Chief of Defence Staff, Brigadier Omar Khan, and also engaging the media on exiting the polling station, commenting, of course, that the process was quite orderly this morning and thanking all of those involved in the process. Also saying that no soldier, no rank of the Ghana Defence Force has been coerced in any way to vote for any specific political party. We saw several persons observing the process also at Base Camp in Ghana, and I know the president himself was here, and he visited Base Camp in Ghana after his observation here at Eve Leary. Of course, saying that he does not intend to campaign, he does have a right to observe the process. Also observing that process are other key figures from the Guyana Elections Commission. We saw the public relations officer and the deputy Chief Elections Officer, alongside international observers. Specifically on my end, we saw the EU Observer Mission, and we also saw commissioners from the Guyana Elections Commission. On my end, we saw APNU-AFC appointed commissioner, Mr. Desmond Trotman. But altogether, all of these observers commenting that the process was quite orderly. Mr. Trotman staying away from saying orderly, but he did in fact say that his observations showed that the process was quite normal. As I said, the voting will continue throughout the day. We're still seeing some lines this morning, but we are expecting that will not last throughout the day. Vishani, I'll give you an opportunity to note.
Much of the same has unfolded here at Police Headquarters Eve Leary, Georgetown. We saw first in line here was the Commissioner of Police, Clifton Hicken. He went to cast his ballot first, and he was joined by other members of his executive leadership team. That would be the executive leadership team of the Guyana Police Force. Now, importantly for our viewers, I'd like to point out that the discipline services, that includes the members of the Guyana Police Force, members of the Guyana Defense Force, and members of the Guyana Prison Service, they're voting on Friday, August 22nd. That's just about 10 days ahead of the September 1 general and regional elections, and that's because they will be on duty on E-Day, Election Day. So, as is customary, they've been given the opportunity to vote ahead of E-Day. Here at the police force headquarters, Mr. Hicken noted that there are systems in place to ensure that all ranks, all 6,909 ranks who are expected to vote today, are able to do so. He spoke about a phased approach at voting, wherein, of course, you wouldn't leave police stations without officers there.
Right.
So they've implemented a system where some officers vote first, and then those officers go back and the other officers come. So it's expected to be a smooth and efficient system of allowing all officers to vote. Of course, those nearly 7,000 police officers are just a fraction of the overall 10,481 discipline services officers expected to vote today. And like Kurt said, so far it has been a smooth process from what we've observed, but also from what other officials, party agents, and observers have also noted. We've engaged some of them here. We spoke to Deputy Chief Elections Officer Anil Giddings. He came here just about 1 hour after the polls opened, and he noted that there were no major issues so far in the hour that polls were open. And then we saw President Dr. Finale come here, and he's the presidential candidate of the People's Progressive Party Civic. He also went inside to observe the process that was unfolding.
Thank you, Prashani. And just quickly as we wrap up, I know we've been saying it all morning, but for those ranks from either the Guyana Police Force, the Guyana Defense Force, or the Guyana Prison Service who were not able for one reason or another to cast their ballots on August 22nd, they will be allowed to cast their ballots on September 1st. Of course, in the areas where they are registered to vote. And also the counting of the discipline service ballots. Once the polling day ends at 6 p.m. today, those ballots will be placed into envelopes and into containers, which will be sealed. They're gazetted polling stations for E-Day, where the discipline services ballot will be intermixed for counting.
Yes. All right, Kurt. That's all for us in our live coverage this morning of the discipline services voting. I'm Vishani Raghaber.
I'm Kurt Campbell. Thank you.
Thank you, Vishani and Kurt. This has been the newsroom's live coverage of voting by members of the discipline forces. Just to reinforce that point about the secrecy of the ballot, that after members of the discipline forces vote today, no one knows who they have voted for. They can't say who they voted for. You can't ask them. Of course, you can ask them, but they're not obligated to tell you who they have voted for. At the end of the day, there will be no tabulation of the votes cast in this voting process. All of the ballots will go into a special envelope called the PE20 envelope, and those ballots will then be intermixed with ballots at a particular polling station in the district in which they have voted, and then is when their votes will be counted. Even then, there will be no distinction or no differentiation of which ballot came from the army or the police or the prison service. It's just all mixed together, and then the votes will be counted and then tabulated. Of course, we will have continuing coverage of voting today, Friday, August 22nd, by members of the disciplined forces. And for that, you can follow us on our social media pages. We're on Facebook, X, and on TikTok, YouTube, and also our website, newsroom.gy. I'm Neil Marks. Take care.